Okay. Well, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, so I have been serving with Pie Ranch for the past year. Thank you for everyone that decided to come, at least from Pie Ranch staff. I know some of you are on the Zoom call right now. So yeah, I titled my presentation Understanding the Whole Pie as a Means of Land Stewardship. Um, and I will explain how that connects to my service term here. So Pie Ranch is located along Highway 1 in Pescadero, California. It's about 25 minutes north of Santa Cruz and about an hour north of San Francisco, for those who haven't ever heard of Pescadero. And it is located in the unceded lands of the Croste tribe, for which there are no known descendants. This is due to the particular brutality of the Santa Cruz mission system. But now these lands are stewarded by the Amamutsun tribal band and the land trust. On the screen here, I put their jurisdiction as well as its relation to Pie Ranch. And they they are comprised of the tribal descendants within territories that were influenced by the San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz mission system. And so now they are stewarding this land in honor of the Croste people. And so this area in Pescadero that we're actually situated on used to be and partially is still coastal prairie, which is an increasingly rare habitat. And since that indigenous stewardship was wiped away, the landscape has progressively turned to coastal scrub with a lot of introduction of Douglas fir and now especially invasives like eucalyptus. And so part of AMLT's stewardship efforts with Pie Ranch began in 2014 with the Memorandum of Understanding. And this was so that tribal members could gather and access these lands in perpetuity. And now some of the efforts that they are able to do and have been doing are planting a native garden at Pie Ranch that we now use for education, gathering seed sources, and other uses such as those at Cascade Ranch, which I'll go into. They also have native garden beds where they are able to um, source seeds for their native plant stewardship program and repopulate areas such as Croste Valley, which is a cultural preserve near Pie Ranch. And then they're also able to restore Cascade Creek and Green Oaks Creek, which are the neighboring creeks, with tribal members and volunteers. And so Pie Ranch is a food justice nonprofit organization, and they have their hands in a lot of aspects of the movement. But the primary metaphor for why Pie Ranch is called what it is because food justice is multifaceted and requires whole systems change and whole systems thinking in order to move towards a more equitable and compassionate society. And so it involves every aspect of the food production process as well, which all have their own ethics attached to them. So they all must be taken into account in order to address food justice fully. And it is one of historical oppression and exploitation, which cannot be linked to only one solution. So every piece of the pie needs to be considered. And so in 2018, Pie Ranch began leasing the neighborhood or the neighboring property, which is Cascade Ranch, and where I've been doing most of my work this year. And they host a program called the Cascade Regenerator Program, which Jasmine actually used to work on. And this program provides land, affordable equipment, and guidance for emerging farmers to build their business. And it's also intended to focus on helping those that have been traditionally marginalized from farm ownership, as another way of moving in the direction of a more just food system. And so Cascade is also a very collaborative working land between farmers, the tribal band, and conservationists. I think it's a beautiful example of what Pie Ranch is trying to exemplify in terms of land stewardship, just because it's a parcel of land that's been worked and tended by farmers, conservationists, and a tribal land trust. And it's not that often that all three of those entities can come together in solidarity and um, have a mutual respect for the land, although there's different goals there. So I just wanted to mention, I think it's a beautiful demonstration of what the whole pie can represent. And so one of my main service goals here at Pie Ranch was working with UC Santa Cruz and Cascade on a integrated aquaculture agriculture research project. This was my introduction into aquaculture. I've never really been introduced to it at all or heard of it at all. But UC Santa Cruz received a grant for a project that would research the feasibility of integrated aquaculture or IAA systems and working farms. And Cascade is acting as their incubator site for the 2 years of the grant. And so for those who don't know, IAA is essentially farming in conjunction with a fish production system, where resources for cultivating both fish and crops can be shared. It's has been widely used historically, and there's many studies on it as of now, mostly with tilapia and more field-based systems. But our research was a bit different. And many of the studies show that IAA has the potential to do a few things. One being reducing the overall water use by stacking functions and using tank water for irrigation needs, as well as reducing costs on any pricey external nutrient inputs the fish effluents can provide. I mean, a more or less free nutrient input for plants. It also has the potential to stimulate soil microbial communities, and it's deemed a very good alternative product for farmers to offer an additional income stream. And so the intention of this project, like I was mentioning, is a little bit different than the others that have been historically studied. This project was intended to establish models for wider adoption of IAA, also to enhance or understand how it could enhance food systems and restore local ecosystems, as well as engage those acutely affected by climate change, who could potentially benefit directly by integrating IAA. And so our experiment would be testing how the backwash effluent from native rainbow trout would affect the growth of 9 different native plant species. We would be doing 6 native shrubs in the fall and the spring, and then 3 species of willows in the winter. And there'd be 2 treatments that we'd be testing. One would be with just well water, and one would be the well water amended with the effluent. And that during that study, we would be monitoring their plant growth at 3 main growth stages, as well as their water use and their nutrients, and then the potting media profile and the soil microbial communities in them. And so the study is not only aimed at assessing the benefits and feasibility of it, but it was also meant to be a real-world restoration project and provide those real-world agroecological benefits that IAA promises. So the plants that were not going to be used for destructive sampling were also going to be reserved for a couple restoration and hedgerow uses at Cascade. There are a couple hedgerows planted and going to be planted that these plants can be used for, and also riparian restoration efforts along Cascade Creek that those willows, as well as some other plants, can be outplanted into. And the hope is that these plants will expand over time and can grow a larger hedgerow, but also for the riparian area would replace larger eucalyptus stands that staff and volunteers and state parks have been working really hard at removing, which I'll go into a little bit in a moment. And so all of the plants that we chose for the experiment were also suggested and approved by the tribal band. And this was important so that they were culturally relevant food or medicine sources and provide a more cultural ancestral connection to our climate resiliency goals that we're trying to implement. And so our role in this was less on the fish side and more on the propagation side. And it has taken a lot of forms throughout this year. And my role ended up being a lot more in the planning process, which has been very rewarding for me. It was intended to start this spring, but now we've planned it so that all of our propagation will begin this fall. And so with that, I was responsible for keeping an experimental design document that would kind of outline our entire plans and site specifics and timelines and everything for the project. You can barely see them, but I put a couple on the slide there just to get an idea of the kinds of work that I've been doing on the backside. And yeah, so aside from that, the most rewarding part of this project was all the propagation efforts that I got to take part in. And I would say this was the majority of my time spent this year, at least it felt like it. And yeah, the native plant propagation was necessary for this project, but it was also necessary for other conservation efforts that we had. And we basically got to develop a small nursery operation at Cascade this year, which was a really wonderful experience. And so throughout the course of the year, we've worked with and familiarized ourselves with about 30 native plant species, more or less, whether that be from our own propagation, beginning from seed collection, or caring for plants that were propagated for us by the tribal band, or a nursery in Santa Cruz, or Xerces Society. And so working with native plants this year has been a really amazing connector for me in terms of being with the land and understanding the kind of landscape I've been working on this entire year. I found it's really required me to pay attention to each species in a lot of ways, and whether that be, really paying attention to what they look like and all parts of them, from their seeds or their leaves or their flowers, and at different stages of their growth, throughout caring for them and collecting seeds for them. Yeah, and how to care for them requires its own attention span, and you know, thinking about what seed treatment is necessary and when transplanting is necessary and what not watering needs are necessary, and kind of being in tune with that based off of their visual appearance. And also how they interact with their habitat, like where can I find them, where do they grow, when do they bloom, and what wildlife might utilize them. And so these, I haven't paid too much attention at this depth and scale since until this year. And it's been one of the most meaningful parts of this service term. And yeah, I found there's a lot to notice when you harvest and process seed in particular. And when you meet them at the time when there's a lot of change happening with the plant, you notice their flowers and their intricacies at this time, and you often notice, when you're seed processing, you have to open them up and, see how they all interact and release, and all the details that you would only find if you were really interacting with the plants at that scale. And so we've been tracking our observations and activities almost daily, and we can begin to develop our own propagation protocols for Cascade. As of now, we've only been using online sources and databases, as well as just direct advising. But as we've been working with these plants more and more and have a data set there from our experience, we can start to build out our own protocols that we can use over the years. And so I created a template for those, and hopefully by the end of my service term, I'll be able to fill out a few of those with some of the plants we've been working with pretty meticulously. But hopefully that template can just be a good resource for Cascade in the future. And so, as I mentioned, one of the purposes of our propagation was for a couple native pollinator hedgerows that would be planted at Cascade. The first one was already pre-designed when I arrived there. But for the most part, when I began, for this next one, I got to help with the actual design, which I put a little sample there just to get an idea of kind of what goes into it. Jonah mentioned this in his presentation, but just, trying to figure out what makes the most sense for the visual aspect, but also for, yeah, like stability and just all the other detail, bloom time, fruiting time, all the other aspects that go into designing a hedgerow. And so this hopefully will be planted in the next month or so. And so there's also a lot of riparian restoration that happens both at Cascade and Pie Ranch, with the foundational support from AMLT and community volunteers. Cascade and Green Oaks Creek have an abundance of invasive plants, primarily blue gum eucalyptus, which was exacerbated by the CZU fire that happened a few years ago. And eucalyptus is very powerful in their spread and very vigorous. And I wanted to share one statistic that we gathered recently. So Cascade has Cascade and AMLT both host bi-monthly volunteer events called Weedamouts, and those began in 2022 to remove eucalyptus along Cascade Creek, and since then 13,195 cubic feet of eucalyptus saplings were removed, and that's equivalent to the capacity of 11 shipping containers, which I think is pretty incredible. And so we've done a lot of invasive removal independently over the year, but it does not compare to the amount of impact that happens when volunteers and community come together. And it's been a really inspiring thing to be able to see how many people come out for this purpose. And so one of the second main capacity building projects that I was tasked with was coordinating Pie Ranch's Food Hub program. And this program developed during COVID as an approach or as an effort to help those experiencing food insecurity. And so this program was at the height during COVID, but this year I was able to coordinate orders and deliveries for one organization in particular called Homey in San Francisco. They serve the Mission District community with bi-weekly food pantries. And then we were also able to participate in one other one for the month of November with the East Palo Alto YMCA, where we were doing weekly CSA food distributions up to that community as well, which I put some photos of on the slides here. And for those, we also were trying to reach the communities we're delivering to, but we also aim to purchase our produce from emerging farmers, and preferably those that have been typically marginalized from farm ownership, so that we can also continue to be food justice mission aligned. So Pie Ranch is also an educational farm and brings out thousands of youth to the land each year. These programs have looked different over the years, but as of now, students of all ages from around the Bay Area and Santa Cruz come for single or multi-day field trips. And their learning is very hands-on and interactive and multidisciplinary. And they all should leave with some conceptual idea of what food justice is and its importance. And so this was initially not part of my service term goals, but I really wanted to be involved with the programs team, and luckily Pie Ranch was really welcoming with this idea. So I did get to assist and facilitate some of the lessons and workshops for these field trips. And so the groups range from K through 12, and the curriculum's adjusted on the age, and they're able to participate in a variety of activities, which I listed on the screen here. And all of them have a direct relationship and connection with concepts that make up food justice, as well as sustainability and Indigenous history, just to name a couple. And ultimately, being able to facilitate a connection between the students and their food, as well as the land, has been very empowering. Considering a lot of the students that come, it's a pretty new experience for a lot of them getting to be out here. So yeah, getting to facilitate that has been really wonderful. And yeah, aside from all of my service work, that was just, I'd say, a summary of everything, but there's a lot of joy that happens at Pie and a lot of fun and community building that happens here. And I've been so lucky that it's been my host site for the past year, and that they've been so welcoming in allowing me to join all parts of the organization. I've had quite a few days getting to work on the farm and getting to harvest and work with all of their youth corps that they host. The youth corps are younger adults that get to come work on the farm. And so they have also been a really amazing community builder for me. Staff connection has also been a very noticeable priority at Pie Ranch, just in the manner that we all interact with one another and meaningfully check in with one another and set aside time for solidarity days and fun days and things of that sort, which I think has been a really important aspect of just staying focused and feeling motivated and optimistic in all the work that we've been doing. And yeah, Pine Ranch has truly been a place of love for one another and the land, and has been a beautiful place to be for the last 11 months. And with that, I just wanted to acknowledge a few of the people that have been very helpful and attentive and collaborative this year. Leonard, who is my supervisor, he's the director of farmer and rancher operations at Cascade, and Rosanna Petrulia, who has been my persistent collaborator this entire year. She's the ag and natural resource conservation specialist at Cascade as well. And then Sharif Musaji, who's the director of food education programs, who I got to work on the Food Hub project with, as well as a lot of the programs. And then just all Pie Ranch staff, thank you. And then those at AMLT that I've gotten the chance to work with and collaborate with, those at UCSC that I've gotten to collaborate with, and then, of course, everyone at GrizzlyCorps.